Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. With me are Mike Tagliere and Kyle Yates. Find us on Twitter at DanHarrisAD, at Mike Tagliere NFL, and at Kyle Y NFL. Gentlemen, it's a snowy day here. It's bad. How's it for you? Tags, I know you got hit pretty hard by this, right?
Yeah, it was on Sunday, and it was the first Sunday without football since like early September. So obviously there's no coincidence there, and it comes down. I get about 12 inches of snow, and even worse is that my snowblower decides it doesn't want to work. And the worst part about all of it is I would have legitimately went and bought a new one. I would have done that. However, I'm going to be moving away from this damn state, so I'm not going to have to deal with snow anymore. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to suck it up. I'm going to shovel. I'm going to break my back, essentially, and get this out of the way. So I did, and it really sucked, but I got it done.
Well, ours came in today, really, like overnight yesterday. We were a day behind you or whatever, and as I was saying, if my snowblower does not start today, then I'm just going to huddle up until the snow melts. So I'm good. Like the idea of manual labor of like using a shovel. I try to bribe the kids. I told you guys, I try to bribe my kids. They get really excited to shovel. They go out for like 3 seconds and then they're done. And then I buy them Lego sets for quote unquote helping because I don't know how to be a dad. Anyway, Yates, did you get snow over there or are you clean?
Oh, no, of course. We got snow here in Michigan. But actually, surprisingly, we didn't get it as bad as Tags and yourself. So I have my little snowblower. I was out there, took care of it pretty quick. But so no complaints here.
Well, the worst part is that school is canceled and Tags, I feel like school now gets canceled. This was not like what it was like for you growing up, right? Like school is canceled. It's like, oh, it's going to be cold. School's canceled.
I don't understand what happened to this generation, but I mean, I hate to say be the get off my lawn guy, but growing up, there was like, if there was a snow day, it was because there was legit over a foot of snow or there was a flood where buses legitimately could not get through a subdivision. Whereas nowadays, my kids, their school gets canceled if it's like 5 below zero. And it's like, the diesel's going to freeze up. No, it's not. Stop it. Send them to school, get to school. And it's, I have a feeling that Yates is one of the guys that has actually gotten off school quite a bit because they had snow days.
Well, Yates, you're in 8th grade. So was school canceled for you today or were you off from
well,
school
joke's on you, Dan, because I was homeschooled growing up. So, yeah.
Darn. All right.
But no, so you guys legitimately just sound like back in my day, I had to walk backwards to school in the freezing snow.
Correct. We are.
It's
one
true.
day, growing up in New York, one time, blizzard of 96. It was January of 1996. School closed for 2 days. That's it. Now, legitimately, it might not even snow. The forecast just looks bad. Or it is, again, cold. I don't know when cold Tags was enough to cancel. We are such grumpy old men. It's horrific.
We are.
But it's on brand, at least for us. Okay. Anyway, we do actually have a show today to talk about things other than snow, although you can check us out on our other podcast, Grumpy Old Men Talking About Snow. The plan for today is we're going to talk about the fantasy impact of the Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff trade. So a lot of moving parts there. By the way, I will point out there is like nothing more indicative. I know exactly when Yates is working and how much work he's doing based on when there is breaking news. When there is breaking news and Yates is working, there is an immediate Slack message to me and Tags. Yep. And I mean immediate. I mean like I have notifications set for every major beat writer, for Schefter, for Rappaport, everything like that. If Yates is in the middle of working, so he's at a computer and he's working right there, I don't know how. But Yates is the breaking news person because I get a Slack notification from Yates about like a trade or something happening before I even see it from Schefter. It's incredible. So for this one, I can tell that Yates was not working because Tags and I had a lengthy breakdown of this discussion before Yates popped in. It was like, what's going on, guys? What's happening?
I was literally in the middle of playing a game of Warzone and didn't see my phone going off at all. So then I like end the game and I'm like, what just happened? What the world ended?
The problem is he can't hide because I know because he cannot like immediately. He's just like, oh my God. And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about. But anyway, so Yates was not working while that broke. But anyway, last week we did early running back rankings disputes between Tags and Yates. Today we'll do wide receivers. And it's fun because there are some bigger differences here, as you might imagine, since there are more wide receivers to rank. So we'll be doing that today. Before we jump into it, I have a lot of very exciting things to talk about very quickly before we get into it. First, winners and giveaways and all that stuff. So the perfect draft contest that we were running on Twitter and the Deontay Johnson signed jersey contest, Both of those have ended. We are going to be picking the winner today, maybe tomorrow, depending on all the snow and stuff like that. But we will announce that. But we do have a new giveaway for February. It is a signed J.K. Dobbins jersey. That is our February contest, going to run through the end of the month. You know how to do it. Leave a review for the show on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. Send a screenshot of that review. Go to contest. Take a screenshot of that review. Go to fantasypros.com/contest, and then you can enter. Now, that is a very, very good giveaway. Okay, I'm very excited about that giveaway. But we have an even bigger giveaway here for the Super Bowl. If you would like an autographed helmet from a player who is both an NL MVP and a Super Bowl winner, that is what we are giving away on our Super Bowl live stream over at youtube.com/bettingpros. You guys know Pristine Auction. They provide all the jerseys of the J.K. Dobbins jersey, the Deontay Johnson jersey. They have these things called mystery boxes where they kind of give you a limited set of amazing players that might be within the mystery box, but you don't know who it is till you open it. So we're not looking at it yet. All we know is it's a former NFL MVP who is also a Super Bowl winner. We are going to unveil it live on the live stream. If you want to enter, just go to that live stream. Again, it starts at 4:30 Eastern, youtube.com/bettingpros. There'll be a form that you can enter. That's it. Sign up, enter the giveaway. And by the end of that hour, we are going to announce the winner. It's really awesome. We're going to be talking about a ton of prop bets for the Super Bowl. I am going back to old Dan Harris where I'm doing full projections for the game. So I am going to have some prop bets ready to go for sure. It's sponsored by WinBet, so we're going to be doing all of that. Again, youtube.com/bettingpros, 4:30 Eastern to 5:30 Eastern. You can win a signed helmet from someone who is an NFL MVP and a Super Bowl winner. So go ahead and do that. And again, if you want more prop bets, Daily Juice Podcast, Betting Pros, NFL Podcast, find both wherever you listen to podcasts. Or you can go to bettingpros.com/podcast for our regular show, bettingpros.com/dailyjuice for the Daily Juice. We are going to have prop bet episodes. Matt Peralta and I are going to be recording the Betting Pros one tomorrow night, so that will drop Thursday. So again, don't forget to check it out. Tons of prop bets. We're going to win some money on Super Bowl Sunday. Okay, I've talked enough. Let's get into it. Rams-Lions trade. Okay, so I guess, Tags, let's start with you, and let's start with the impact on Rams. So let's start with the impact on any Rams skill player, and of course on Matthew Stafford. How do you view them now that Stafford has been traded to the Rams?
I mean, he's part of a competent organization, a team that is really going to win now. The Rams understand exactly what they're doing, and they don't have a first-round pick again until 2023 or 2024, whatever it is. The last first-round pick that they made was Jared Goff, yet they're a team that's continually in the playoffs. And Yates, I remember you and I talking about, before this season, we were talking about the Rams as an organization and saying, wow, they lost a lot of pieces, that defense. It's like Yates was saying that it was possible that this team finished with like 4 wins. And right. I was inclined to kind of agree, but at the same time, Sean McVay, I'm like, he's good enough to get there. And then they make the playoffs. And it's like the defense is all of a sudden one of the best in the NFL, if not the best defense in the NFL. So they know what they're doing. They continue to develop players without those first-round picks. And Matthew Stafford finally goes to a winning organization. So Stafford, is he going to be trusted a lot more than he was, going back with the Lions? I don't know. It's tough to say that because Stafford's gone through a lot of coaching regimes where we've seen him, attempt over 650 passes in a year. We continually see that defense be terrible. Whereas Jared Goff, this Rams team, they went from a team that was extremely run heavy, then they went pass heavy, then they went run heavy again. We never know what they're going to do. They're always changing. But when you trade for someone like Matthew Stafford, you have to think you're going to start building around that passing game a little bit. Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, those guys are safe. I mean, I'm not going to bump them too far up in my standings. If anybody gets a big bump from this, to me, I think it's Tyler Higbee, and I think it's Van Jefferson, the rookie pick from last year, second-round draft pick, that he got a little bit of playing time this year behind Josh Reynolds, but there was a connection between Goff and Reynolds that they really weren't. It seemed like they didn't want to move on from. So Van Jefferson is someone that moves into like that sleeper conversation as someone who could stretch the field, because Stafford is someone who is willing to chuck the ball deep, whereas Jared Goff was really more of a check down guy, and he's willing to, he was looking for wide receivers to gain separation all over the field, whereas Stafford is willing to throw it up in those one-on-one situations if he has a guy down the field that's one-on-one. So I'm going to bump up, someone like Higbee and Van Jefferson, whereas Woods and Kupp, I still like them. I always did like them. We always felt like they were undervalued last year. So Woods is going to be a competent number 2. I think Kupp should stay in the low end wide receiver 2 conversation, and then again sleeper appeal for someone like Van Jefferson. And then as for Stafford, he moves up into that Matt Ryan territory for me. Is that low end QB1, high end QB2, where if you want to draft him with one of your late picks, you're able to get him, and you could probably start him most weeks. And then if you wanted to, you can also grab one of those Taysom Hill or someone like that in one of your final picks, and just like one of those upside quarterbacks to say, hey, if he pans out, I could always trade one of these quarterbacks just to see what you have. So it's a good thing for the Rams. It's a good thing for Stafford. I don't think there's any losers on the Rams side of the ball with Stafford there.
Yates, do you disagree with anything that Mike said?
No, I mean, the Rams looked at their offense, they looked at Jared Goff, and they said, yeah, he can win us some games in the regular season, but we're, like Tag said, we're in win-now mode, right? They're continuously pushing for Super Bowls, and Jared Goff wasn't going to be able to get them over the hump, right? He's a system quarterback at this point of his career, and yes, the system is incredible, and he can execute it, but they needed something to get them over the top, to beat those top-tier defenses, and that's what Matthew Stafford brings. So Stafford, I think, elevates this entire offense. I think with Cam Akers, we saw him take, 30 carries towards the end of this season. I don't think that's going to happen now with Matthew Stafford under center. I think that was more so just trying to take the ball out of Jared Goff's hands and, work with his limitations. But so I think Cam Akers could see his scoring opportunities go up because I think it elevates the offense, but he could see his workload go down a little bit too. I do like what Tag said about Tyler Higbee. That's a guy that we need to talk about because Gerald Everett expected to leave in free agency. You do have Bryson Hopkins behind him now as the tight end 2 there, but Hopkins at this point has shown nothing that he's going to be super involved. So I think Higbee, if you're moving into next year, again, we'll know more when we do the projections and stuff like that, but Higbee could be a guy that you look at and draft as a late round tight end.
So you agree, though, Yates, that you are not really moving the needle on Woods or Kupp. I mean, they were both obviously desirable commodities, even though Jared Goff did not push the ball downfield whatsoever. The fact that Stafford has historically done that and is probably more willing to do that. Do you agree, though, with Tags, then I guess that's great, but it doesn't really move the needle for you necessarily on Kupp or Woods in terms of their fantasy outlook in 2021?
Right. It bumped them up slightly. I moved them up like a couple of spots just because of the quarterback upgrade, because I do view this as an upgrade from Jared Goff to Matthew Stafford. So bumped them up a couple of spots, but yet they're still going to be extremely safe options. I think that they're going to be really, really solid. The Van Jefferson one, I'm a little bit curious how they utilize him and if they bring Josh Reynolds back, because Van Jefferson is not known as a burner. He's more of a refined route runner underneath. So I'm just curious how exactly they're going to use him and who exactly is going to be stretching the field next season. So we'll see. But I do think that it bumps up Woods and Kupp just a couple of spots.
All right, so on the other side of the trade, you've got Goff going to the Lions. We have no idea really who he'll be throwing the ball to at this point necessarily, but I guess Yates, break it down from that perspective. I assume Jared Goff is not going to be anywhere close to a top 12 QB for you, someone that you're drafting for fantasy at the very least, right?
No. Looking at the Lions, the only wide receivers that are under contract for next season at this point are Quintez Cephus and Geronimo Allison, who opted out of the 2020 season. So you have Kenny Galladay, who they could franchise tag, but they're heading into a multi-year rebuild. I really doubt that they're going to try and, franchise tag Kenny Galladay. If anything, they'll do a tag and trade. But then after that, you're looking at, okay, you're going to have to build it through the draft. So now heading into next season, Jared Goff, I put out a tweet just recently saying, how do we value Jared Goff in Superflex Dynasty Leagues? Because just trying to figure out, what's his value? What do people actually think about Goff now here in Detroit? Because the Rams had to pay Detroit an additional first-round pick to take Jared Goff and his contract off their hands. So that speaks everything to me to say that Jared Goff is not the guy, and I don't think that he's going to be the guy here in Detroit. He might be a stopgap starter, but you could see them at number 7 overall draft a quarterback this year if one is sitting there. So there's a possibility that Jared Goff, comes out of the gate as a starter this year, but if they draft a quarterback, it wouldn't surprise me at all that eventually takes over.
What about you, Tags? I mean, I don't know how you really evaluate this necessarily because we don't know exactly what the Lions offense is going to look like next year, but essentially break down the Lions for me with this trade for Goff.
I mean, I feel bad for Jared Goff if he's delusional to the point where he says, I just wanted to go somewhere that they wanted me.
Right.
I mean, I feel bad in that aspect because I think he has to tell himself that, but at the same time, the team, it basically, I cannot believe the reaction on Twitter in social media is like, if this happened, if this is what Matthew Stafford got, what's Deshaun Watson going to get? I'm like, you guys are leaving out the biggest part of this equation. Like, stop reacting to, like, this is like legit elementary stuff. Like, you have to think next level and say the salary cap is a real thing, especially in 2021 and over the next couple of years, just because of that revenue sharing, and taking on that contract is massive. And that's another issue when trading for Deshaun Watson. So Jared Goff, do I think that he's the answer for the Detroit Lions? Absolutely not. Do I think Dan Campbell is the answer for the Lions? Probably not. There's a lot of unknowns there. Signing Anthony Lynn as the offensive coordinator, that might work out, but I'm going to downgrade everybody on this offense. I was excited to have Quintez Cephus as like a dynasty hold, a guy that I was planning on Marvin Jones moving on in free agency. Danny Amendola was a free agent, and it was like, all right, Matthew Stafford has continually supported fantasy wide receivers. I want Quintez Cephus because I actually think he's a really talented dude as well. Jared Goff, if you look at Jared Goff, remember when he played for Jeff Fisher, guys? Do you guys remember that?
Yes.
People left him for dead. After legit half of a season, they said, is Jared Goff a bust already? And then all of a sudden, Sean McVay arrives and everything changed. And then we slowly saw Jared Goff regress back to the quarterback that he kind of was, right? And he started to struggle. He wasn't as bad as he was with Fisher, but now you're going back into a totally different scheme. You don't have Sean McVay anymore. You don't have pass catchers. I don't like it at all. And I'm in a group message with one of my leagues, and the one was a guy started talking about, DeAndre Swift. At least this doesn't hurt his stock so much. I'm like, well, yeah, it does. I think it does, just because. And they're basically saying that he's going to be the focal point of the offense, which is fine. He should have been from the get-go, but it's all about the team and what they offer you from a scoring standpoint. If your defense is crap and your offense doesn't have a quarterback to put points on the board continually, that lowers running backs for me. And I understand the wanting to get a running back that's going to get 20 touches per game. Do we know if he gets that? I don't know. We don't know. There's a lot of unknown. But Anthony Lynn, when you go to the Chargers, he really did want a timeshare. So it would not shock me to see them sign some sort of running back to be the thumper, whereas DeAndre Swift is going to be that movable chess piece that Campbell talked about lining up in the slot. So I'm downgrading everyone in the Lions because of this, unfortunately. And Jared Goff, I don't think that the Lions did not trade because they really, 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 really wanted Jared Goff. They didn't do that.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I wonder whether or not Jared Goff actually believes that, or whether or not he's just trying to kind of publicly be like, oh, yes, blah, 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 this is great. But regardless, we've got tons to get into. Okay, so let's get into it. We've got rankings disputes here. I will stress, as I did with the running back rankings, this is so preliminary. And as you can see, a lot of these guys have not signed. We don't know where they're going to play next year. So, of course, there's going to be serious rankings disputes there. We did last week is I started off at sort of the top, Kamara and Saquon Barkley were the top, even though the differences are small. Going to do it a little differently this time. I'm going to start sort of with the bigger differences and work our way down to the smaller differences. And the person with the biggest delta between rankings is, in fact, Corey Davis, a guy who we love to talk about. Frankly, Corey Davis could be like the poster boy for this show. Yates, you have him 25th. Tags, you have him 46. That is a 21 spot difference. Now, we obviously do not know what team necessarily he's going to be on. So I'll start with you, Yates. I like Corey Davis. I really do. But it's hard for me to see too many scenarios wherever he ends up where this isn't a pretty aggressive ranking of Corey Davis. So why don't we start with you, 25th overall, make your case.
Yeah, this is kind of mixing it, right? As far as okay, is he back? Could he be back with the Titans next year, or could we see him in a more prolific offense? So I think with Corey Davis, the talent level, he finally broke out, right? That late breakout with Corey Davis, and I think that the talent is there. We saw him be a fantasy factor. We talked about it throughout the season that outside of the game against Chicago, he was one of the most consistent fantasy wide receivers that we saw all season long. It kind of tailed off towards the end, but with Corey Davis, still a very, very talented wide receiver. Even if he is back with Tennessee, I think that the passing offense here can support A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. I don't think that we see I think it's going to be an either or of Corey Davis or JuJu Smith. I doubt both are back with the cap situation. So if we do see JuJu leave in free agency, then that opens a ton of targets here for Corey Davis. So that's kind of where I'm projecting, but if we do see him end up somewhere else in a different offense, he will certainly come crashing back down my rankings. It's really just kind of a placeholder right now.
All right. So, again, he did, to be fair, because I called it aggressive, he was the 31st wide receiver total. And, again, that really is kind of meaningless at this point. But he did play just 14 games, and he was the 31st ranked wide receiver. So, Tags, 46. I guess, are you expecting him to go back to Tennessee? Is that what your ranking assumes? Or are you just basically saying, like, look, until I know, I'm just going to kind of push him down. If I were drafting right now, I don't want to draft the unknown.
Well, when doing rankings right now, you have to evaluate both. Like, when I do rankings right now, I pretend like I'm drafting. Like, I'm sitting in the draft room and I have to do an early draft. Does it make any sense to do a draft right now? Absolutely not. But if you are, this is where I would draft Corey Davis. And I'm saying that because if you wound up with the Titans again, I'd probably move him to my upper third, or to around wide receiver 35-ish is where I'd probably put Corey Davis. I think this year was a product of A.J. Brown a little bit being banged up, and it's the reason that we didn't see A.J. Brown see more than 9 targets until like the final week of the season. I think 2021 is the year where legit A.J. Brown becomes a superstar. Like, he already is, right? But
I'm going to take issue with that, all right? He already is.
Yeah,
correct.
He already is, but I'm talking about like next level. Like, you're talking about one of the game's best wide receivers. You're talking about the guy that you're contemplating taking in the first round of fantasy drafts. I think that's who A.J. Brown is this year, and that's going to demote Corey Davis a little bit down the pecking order. And again, the Titans have been extremely efficient over the last couple of years. Do we expect that to change? I mean, they should be efficient, but they did lose their offensive coordinator. We don't know what that's going to do to the offense. I have question marks about it. So again, Corey Davis is kind of a guy that it's like, if you draft as your wide receiver 3, you're like, okay, I don't feel terrible about it, but I don't feel great about it. But right now, I'm not anticipating him to be back. This is a team that probably had a chance to work out a contract extension with him. They declined his option. They could have worked out an extension while he was still on the team. We haven't heard whispers about that. This team is really, really weak at wide receiver. They have like legit no depth behind A.J. Brown. None. Absolutely none. So Should he be back? Probably. Will he be back? I don't think so. Because again, I think that they would have worked out something in season with the way that he was playing. So he's probably going to test the free agent market. There's a lot of wide receivers out there, like in the draft this year. There's some guys that are going to come in and start right away. I just don't see a situation where Corey Davis goes to a team and it's like, yeah, I could clearly see him being the number 1 option. I think he's going to be the number 2. He's probably not going to be in an offense that's as efficient as the Tennessee Titans. So again, I would probably rather take my shot on guys like Brandon Cooks. I'd rather take guys like even Mike Williams, who's tied to Justin Herbert. We know he's the number 2, but at least he's tied to Justin Herbert in an offense that should take a step forward in 2021. So I like Corey Davis, the player, but one of the places I do think I could see him landing, if Allen Robinson doesn't, is Baltimore. I think Baltimore would make sense for Corey Davis, pairing him with someone like Marquise Brown, have that field stretcher, have Corey Davis as somewhat the possession style receiver. They need a receiver there, and Corey Davis, I don't know if he's going to be too expensive in free agency.
Okay, so 2 questions then, Tags. I guess number 1, if he does land with Baltimore, where would you expect, I'm not going to hold you to it, but where would you expect that he'll rank?
I will not rank him higher than probably where I have him, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I don't like the landing spot. I didn't like it for Marquise Brown this year. I think it would be good for them from a football standpoint. From a football standpoint, they need that number 1, that safety blanket. Can Corey Davis be that guy? He's not the guy, but he can be somewhat of a guy like that on a run-first team. So, Corey Davis, I think it would be better for a football standpoint, but from fantasy, no.
And if he does end up with Tennessee, which I feel like Yates is kind of thinking that he might, where would you then rank him in your rest?
I'm looking at it right now. I couldn't. I'll put him at 37, 38.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that's fair. I have him right now 37th, but again, I'm not like married to it. This is just something where it's very difficult when we don't know where these guys are going to go. So I try to do it as if I were drafting right now, and there's enough risk there for me to put it. But yeah, I mean, I get it. I do think 25th probably that I can't imagine that wherever he ends up, I'm going to have him there necessarily, regardless of where it is. But I understand the thinking, Yates, and I'm kind of in between you two. But I have a clear side on this next one, okay? And this one's a pretty big difference. It's Chase Claypool. Tags, you're the higher guy here at 33. Yates, you're the low guy here at 50. Yates, without looking it up, where did Chase Claypool finish at the wide receiver position this year?
Oh, I probably would put him at like 36.
Tags, do you know the answer?
I'd say he's top 30.
19th. 19th. Now, we played 16 games. We know it doesn't matter. None of that, matters. But, yeah, a lot better than I thought, too. Now, I have him at 33 as well, exactly where Tags has him. So, Yates, you're really fading him. Explain your reasoning.
Well, I mean, so I don't know if you said where I have him at 50 right now. So,
yeah, 50.
With Claypool, we saw him drop off towards the end of the season, and that was also when we saw the entire offense drop off. So I know that Tomlin talked about the rookie wall and stuff like that with Chase Claypool, and he's a very, very talented wide receiver. However, I just don't know if they're going to bring JuJu back. If they don't bring JuJu back, then Claypool will skyrocket up my rankings. But I think it's going to go, the pecking order will be Deontay Johnson, JuJu Smith-Schuster, and then Chase Claypool in an offense that I really don't want to invest in with a 39, 40-year-old Ben Roethlisberger. So that's kind of where I'm thinking with Chase Claypool right now. Again, a lot can change, but I will probably not have any shares of Claypool next year if you guys have him all the way up at 33.
So imagine for a second that Juju's gone, and he's going to be gone, by the way. He's not coming back. They don't have the money.
That's where I was going, right.
They don't have the money. So let's assume that he's gone. Where would you rank Claypool?
I would probably have Deontay Johnson still way above him. Johnson would probably push top 20 for me, but then I would have Claypool maybe around mid-range wide receiver 3.
Okay, so that's where we have him, though, right? I
mean, that's fair. Yeah.
So, and I think that really is what it comes down to. Tags, because we both have him at 33 tags, and your ranking is based on the assumption, which I think is correct, that JuJu is not going to be back, right?
Yep. And I'm being conservative with this ranking too. I can move him higher, but it was all about like the guys that are above him. It's like they're safer options to me. Like a Jarvis Landry is safe as can be. He's always finishing top 30. Is he sexy? No. But if you have some guys that you're starting every week, and then you get Chase Claypool as your wide receiver, if you have a choice between Landry and Claypool as your wide receiver 4, I'm going to choose Claypool because I'm going to take that upside. Whereas Landry's he's a placeholder essentially. He's a guy that you can plug in your lineup. You feel safe about him. It's fine. But Claypool is the upside guy, the guy that I can see finishing as a top 20 wide receiver without an injury in front of him. You know what I mean? I'm being somewhat conservative with this one, to be honest with you. It's just the guys in front of him just are a little bit more stable, I think. Because Yates is correct. You know, we did see this offense take a slight step back. Was Roethlisberger dealing with some sort of injury? Did the Steelers defense really take a step back? Are they getting older, or is it just the injuries that piled up? Because this team clearly just moved towards a pass-first offense. They didn't have a running back. Who are they going to draft? They don't have money in free agency. They legit are in the negative. They're one of the teams that has zero money to spend. They have to lose money, and that's why there's been talks about Ben Roethlisberger potentially being cut from the team or traded or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts. So I'm being somewhat conservative putting Claypool at 33 because I'd probably want to put him around 29 if I were being a little aggressive.
Well, really quick. So also with Roethlisberger moving into next season, and you talked about what if they do draft a running back. Let's just say at 24, that's their first round pick. Najee Harris out of Alabama is still sitting there. He's a guy 6'3", 230 pounds, that could absolutely just shoulder a huge workload. Then do we see them take an offensive philosophy shift and start to lean on their run game, which then lowers the overall passing volume of the offense, because that's kind of where Claypool was making up. I mean, he had ridiculous touchdown production too, but if that passing opportunity isn't there as much, do you think you would still rank Chase Claypool as aggressively?
I would, because again, Juju's gone, and the reason that I don't think that the Steelers can go with that approach, I love Najee Harris, and I have him as my number 1 running back in this class, but I don't think the offensive line is built to do that. I really don't. If you look at their offensive line, the metrics and everything, the terms of yards created before contact for the running backs, they were one of the worst offensive lines in football. However, when it came to their pass blocking, it's almost like these guys, they use leverage really well. They're able to hold a brick wall, but they're not able to push that wall at all. And that's basically how they're built. And they don't have the money to build it. They don't have the draft equity to do it. So as much as I like Najee Harris, and as much as I do believe that guy is built to handle 25 touches per game, I don't think that they can do this overnight.
At the same time, you have to assume that they're going to try to get more out of their run game than they did this year. Right? They have to.
Right. They can't have Ben throw the ball 50 times per game.
And you couldn't have it. The problem with the Steelers, there were a lot of problems. And again, their defense was decimated by injury and everything like that. But the offense was just like, you're like, okay, so I get it. Ben is not going to get sacked because he absolutely refuses to, obviously. They're just going to get the ball out as quickly as possible. And defenses started basically defending in that matter, saying, the ball's going to come out in 2 seconds. I'm ready for this. I'm not all that worried about what else is going to come. They're going to have to try to establish the run game a little more. But even assuming that they do, regardless of whether or not they're successful, I agree, Tags. And again, this just sort of comes down to, without JuJu, with how good Chase Claypool is, I do expect basically that he'll make up for it with the fact that there is no JuJu, even if they do try to lean heavier on the run. And again, he's always going to be a threat near the end zone. So, yeah, I agree, Tags. It's funny. You mentioned that you were like, I feel like I could push him higher. Ranking Chase Claypool was difficult because I could make an argument easily to push him 5-6 spots higher, easily, but I'm trying to be a little conservative for now. So I am right there with you. I am not with you here on this next guy. I am more with Yates here. And this is Mike Williams, who you mentioned earlier. Tags, you have him 42nd. That's not crazy. Yates, you're fading him 58th right now. I also have him 58th right now. So Tags, look, he finished 45th in 15 games. So, they're certainly there. But explain your ranking of Mike Williams.
He finished 45th while dealing with back injuries throughout the entire season, while dealing with Keenan Allen getting double-digit targets every single game. Mike Williams missed a lot of training camp with Justin Herbert, and that's basically where he needed to develop some chemistry because Herbert started getting started reps, if you guys remember that, and Keenan Allen became his guy. And Mike Williams flashed at different points this season, so if we think that Justin Herbert's going to continue to take a step forward, we don't even know if Hunter Henry's going to be on the team. Hunter Henry's a free agent. They franchise tagged him last year. I don't see them using the franchise tag again on him. So if they can't reach a long-term extension, Mike Williams is the red zone guy. You know what I mean? Justin Herbert, while Keenan Allen's a phenomenal wide receiver, one of the best in the league, Mike Williams is the better go up and get it type of wide receiver, the guy that can score double-digit touchdowns any given year. He's already proved that with Phillip Rivers before. So if Herbert's going to take a step forward, and there just really isn't a whole lot of other targets on this team. Austin Eckler is going to get some targets, even though Herbert. Is he going to target the running back position as much? I don't know. There's a lot of question marks there. It is a new offense, but again, Mike Williams is that guy. He's the go-to receiver. He's the one that you throw it up to in 50-50 wide receiver or 50-50 contested catch situations, whereas Keenan Allen's more of the route runner, the guy that's going to get open, the guy that's going to play more in the slot. So Mike Williams, this is all about like legit, what is it your upside? And there are not many wide receivers in this league that you can get in the 40s that have the ability to post 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns. Mike Williams is one of those guys.
Yeah, I think it is the upside. I think that's where it is essentially. And again, we know that it's there because of Herbert, with another year without the other options. And if he does push the ball down the field, we were all excited. I wasn't quite, but we were mostly excited early in the year with Williams when we thought, until he was battling injuries, that it could be really a huge breakout year. So Yates, 58th, make your case.
Yeah, I think it's mostly just looking at. I get the points that Tags is making as far as the opportunity in the offense and projecting. What we see from Justin Herbert. I do think with Brandon Staley coming in, do we see them lean more towards on the run? Do we see that? What does this offense actually look like? Mike Williams, he has the potential to boom and to explode, but then he also has the potential to just disappear. And so again, we talked about it with the running back rankings and how I look at it. I want to look at the guys and rank the ones who I feel most confident in and projecting that these are safe options at this point of the season. I just don't feel that with Mike Williams at this point.
Yeah, there's upside, like we said. I mean, it's just, I don't know, Tags, like when I'm going through it, I wasn't this year even necessarily. I've just never been comfortable with Mike Williams. He never had 50 catches in a season. He just, I think, yes, I think that there could certainly, go back to booming, but I expect the defense to be a little better. I don't know exactly what the offense is going to necessarily look like, if it'll be exactly the same. So it's just somebody who I try to fight my own biases. Do you guys ever have that where you're just like, man, right. I don't want to draft this player.
Yep.
I really don't. And I think I'm ranking him that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
All right, Chris Godwin. This is tough. We don't know where he's going. Yates, 13th. Tags, 24th. He was 32nd on the year, just 12 games. Not obviously, he could go back to the Bucs, maybe the Colts, maybe my Jets. So Yates, 13th? That's a pretty aggressive ranking. Make your case.
Yeah, I think that he's back in Tampa Bay next year. And the question now becomes, do we see Antonio Brown back in Tampa Bay next year? I have Chris Godwin at 13. I have Mike Evans at 14 right now. So looking at the, just where does AB slide into this? Do we really see him take like a short-term deal? I just don't know if I see that happening. So at this point, I'm ranking Chris Godwin as he's going to be back on the Buccaneers, and we're going to see Mike Evans and him be the main two guys. AB, I'm not sure, so I'm kind of leaving him out of the equation at this point. And with Chris Godwin, he was still extremely safe towards the end of the year. He doesn't have the upside maybe to finish as a top 13 option, but as of right now, I feel confident and safe with him moving into 2021.
All right, Tags, you're ranking him essentially as a low-end wide receiver too. Is it more of the just uncertainty as to where he's going to end up?
There's that built into the fact that even if he does re-sign with Tampa, Antonio Brown I do believe he's going to be back. They've already said that Antonio Brown, they want him back next year. Antonio Brown is clear as it seems like he wants to play. I mean, otherwise he could have just retired. He was already one of the best to ever play the game. Coming back and getting back to a Super Bowl, now dealing with an injury, it's a little frustrating for him, but I'm expecting him to be back, and that's why I have Godwin where I do, because basically the upside of everyone is limited on this offense. We've seen Mike Evans emerge as the go-to guy for Tom Brady. Tom Brady had a phenomenal year by all accounts. You look at how much they threw the ball. They're going to add a running back one way or another. They're going to add a pass catching running back. They're going to add someone to split time with Ronald Jones, whatever the case may be. This defense took a step forward this year. They should continue to build that defense, honestly, this offseason. But it's all about like looking and saying, okay, what are the possibilities here? It's almost like Cooper Kupp, right? Cooper Kupp's a phenomenal wide receiver, but when you start taking a look at all the mouths to feed and everything like that, it's like there's a limited ceiling there for him. He's going to have some splash weeks, and that's kind of how I feel about Godwin. Godwin and Kupp are right next to each other in my rankings. I feel like they're both phenomenal football players. It's just Mike Evans is the number one. He's the go-to guy. He's the guy that's going to get the red zone opportunities. Godwin is the safer one that you could play there, and it's how I kind of feel about Cooper Kupp as well. And then Antonio Brown is a guy that we saw him get better as the year went on. So it's like, was he getting back into game shape? I mean, Gronk talked about coming back. So if Brady takes a slight step backward, everyone loses a little bit of ceiling too. And that's got to happen. We keep saying it's got to happen at some point, but in reality, Tom Brady cannot play till he's 50 years old and continue to play the way he's playing. So there is going to be a natural decline to his play as the years go on. It's crazy to think it hasn't happened yet. It really is. But that's basically what I'm building into Godwin. And I start thinking about the players I have above him, like Adam Thielen, I'd take over him, just feel a little bit safer about it. Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson, Robert Woods, again, Mike Evans. Those are the guys I have above him. So it's not to say he's not in that tier of wide receivers. It's just he has a little bit more questions than most.
So it's interesting. You guys are both just essentially taking it for granted that he is coming back to Tampa Bay then.
Well, right now, I think it seems likely just because they're a team that's built to win, and there's been rumors that they could franchise tag him. They have the ability to do that. They have the cap room to do it. It's hard to see them just let Chris Godwin walk, after his rookie contract. It's just kind of crazy to think after what he's done to say, oh, yeah, we're good with you going to another team. See you later. Bye. Right. I mean, it's possible, I guess. Maybe Julian Edelman comes there. I don't know.
Right. And Yates, you basically said you are like,
yeah, I fully expect him
You're
back.
pretty confident. All right. Let's get to one of Yates's guys who we know. Look, if there's a dispute over where people are ranking Robbie Anderson, then I think we know that Yates is the high guy on Robbie Anderson. We can get to DJ Moore, by the way, because he's also a guy. So it might just be how you guys view this Carolina offense going forward. But Yates, you have Robbie Anderson 29th. Tags, you have him 40th. And he finished 24th on the year. He had kind of this weird year where wasn't scoring any touchdowns. Started off really, extremely, extremely well, then kind of fell off a little bit as the year went on. So Yates, as you did coming into this year, make your case for Robbie Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about him throughout the season saying that he was the wide receiver one in this offense. Now, we saw that shift a little bit as we got more into the season. They figured out how to utilize DJ Moore properly. But so I still have DJ Moore ranked ahead of Robbie Anderson, but yet I still think that Anderson is going to be a viable and safe mid-range wide receiver 3. And that's kind of, that's why I have him ranked here. Curtis Samuel, it's a question mark as to whether or not he's going to be back in Carolina next year. He's a pending free agent, so we could see him move on. And at that point, you see Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore, their target totals just skyrocket. So, I think Robbie Anderson, everyone's going to be sleeping on him again. I will gladly take the dip in value.
All right, Tag. So we can throw in more if you want into this to the extent it factors into where you're ranking Robbie Anderson, because there's a big dispute over that one too. I mean, Yates, you have the guys pretty close. You do have more ahead, as you mentioned. You have more 23rd and Robbie Anderson 29th. Tags, I mentioned you have Robbie Anderson 40th, but you have DJ Moore 14th. So that is a very big difference. If you want to talk about them together, go ahead, but explain your rankings essentially of Anderson and if you want more.
Yeah, no, DJ Moore at the end of the year was a stud. He was turning into the wide receiver that people thought they were getting. It's weird because I was off DJ Moore last year. I wanted Calvin Ridley over him, which was considered like a hot take. And I liked Robbie Anderson as a top 45 wide receiver. I felt like he was going undervalued. However, you saw this offense kind of shift as the year went on. They didn't have a tight end at all. They could be one of the teams that were looking at drafting a tight end this year. They could sign one in free agency, but the tight end position was essentially, it was just non-existent. Then you look at Christian McCaffrey being out most of the year. He's going to steal away some of that production. DJ Moore, again, taking time to learn the offense, get caught up with it. Matt Rule, the reason they signed Robbie Anderson to that 2-year deal, because it was like he knew the offense. He was going to come in. He was comfortable with the player. Robbie Anderson showed that from the get-go, that he's the one that came out of the gates and he was just on fire. He was a top 12 wide receiver for like the first 7 weeks. From weeks 8 through 17, Robbie Anderson was the wide receiver 42 in fantasy football. So it really did trend downhill. Do I think it's going to be that bad? No, I have him at wide receiver 40. I feel like he's the guy that you don't want to rely on every single week. He's the guy that you want to play during bye weeks, or you want to play during a matchup where it's like DJ Moore is going to deal with this shutdown cornerback, and we're going to exploit the matchup on the other side of the field. You can do that, but I don't think that he's someone that's just matchup proof that you want to play every single week. And I think we saw shades of that in 2020. So again, a decent wide receiver 4 to have on your fantasy team, fine, but I don't want to rely on him as an every week starter.
Yeah, for the record, I slightly side with tags here. Again, the difference is at this point, I mean, there's 11 spots there with Robbie Anderson. There's 9 spots difference between DJ Moore. I slightly side with tags here on Robbie Anderson. I have him 37th, and I slightly side with Yates here on DJ Moore. I have him at 20th. So I think maybe I'm just fading the entire Carolina offense, apparently, is where I'm looking at it. But let's talk about the Dallas offense, because we've got 2 wide receivers who you guys differ on a little bit. Start with Michael Gallup. Yates, you have him 37th. Tags, you have him 47th. And then we also have CeeDee Lamb, where Tags, you have him 26th. Yates has him 33rd. So Yates, you're kind of close in how you're ranking both of these guys. You do prefer Lamb. Tags has a giant difference between how he views Lamb and Gallup next season. So let's start with you, Tags. You're pretty high on Lamb there, as I mentioned. You have him 26, and you're pretty low on Gallup. You have him 47. So go ahead and explain your reasoning.
Yep, I was the opposite coming into this year.
Yep.
I'm kind of flipping on this one because CeeDee Lamb, natural progression in his career to year 2 with an actual offseason. And then when Dak Prescott was under center, CeeDee Lamb was the guy. You know, Michael Gallup was forgotten. He was dropped on waiver wires. Michael Gallup's season really kind of took off once Andy Dalton kind of hit his stride. And he kind of started locking on to Michael Gallup a little bit more, whereas Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb were not the go-to guys. Dak Prescott, again, different story. Amari Cooper was a stud, like legit top 12 wide receiver. CeeDee Lamb was a consistent wide receiver too. You could plug in your lineup every week. It seemingly every week it was like 6 catches and 70 yards guaranteed. Like that's basically you could lock out of CeeDee Lamb, even though he didn't score a whole lot of touchdowns in that time frame. Whereas Michael Gallup was more reliant on the big play. I know he had the big game against Seattle when they were really struggling at the beginning of the year, but with Dak, he really didn't do anything else. Michael Gallup is also the guy that's going to be headed towards free agency, so I don't see this team having I don't see them carving out a bigger role for Michael Gallup this year, knowing that they're going to be moving on from him because this team is in salary cap hell as well, and they need to find a way to sign Dak Prescott. So, Michael Gallup, unfortunately, he's a really good receiver. I was a big fan of him coming out of college. I'm still a big fan of him, and I think he's going to do good things when he leaves Dallas. But unfortunately, he's the 3rd wide receiver in this offense. Dak Prescott targets Ezekiel Elliott a little bit more. They got Tony Pollard a little bit more involved. They're going to get Blake Jarwin back in the offense. So there's just so many moving parts in this offense. I just don't see any consistency with Michael Gallup, which it kind of puts him in that Robbie Anderson territory where it's just like, I'll play him in matchups, but I'm not going to stick him in my lineup every single week.
And Tags, if memory serves, you were fading Gallup early on, sort of as we headed into the preseason last year, right? And then you kind of got talked into him as sort of moving him up.
Yeah, he was someone that I didn't, when they drafted CeeDee Lamb, I'm like, oh no, what does this do? Right. And then I started looking around and seeing the targets available in that Dallas offense, and it was like, all right, I'm willing to move him up. And I moved him. I want to say him and Lamb were both around wide receiver 35 for me when the season started. So I was unwilling to kind of take a stance. I felt like Lamb was going to take some time to kind of develop in the NFL where he wasn't going to be ready to play like immediately with no offseason, like no preseason, no training camp. And then all of a sudden it's like, you know, he played better than I thought he would in his rookie year, to be fair. And there's natural, career progression with him where I'm guessing they're going to try and get him the ball more in 2021, which, again, I don't think you're going to take those opportunities away from Amari Cooper.
All right. So, let's talk about you. You have them both close, both as basically low-end wide receiver 3s, essentially. Again, you have Lamb at 33rd and Michael Gallup at 37th. So, go ahead.
Yeah, this is more so just a conversation of target distribution. But I think, when did Dak go down? It was like week 4 or 5, wasn't it?
It was week 5. He played 4.5 games.
Okay, so from last season, weeks 1 through 5, of course you had, CeeDee Lamb just breaking out. He was a wide receiver 12 through that period. Amari Cooper was the wide receiver 13, but then Michael Gallup was the wide receiver 29. So
but
it's not
a lot of that came from one game, though. It was the Seattle game. I'm pulling it up real quick. Yep, he had nine targets, 138 yards, and a touchdown. I remember that one game propping him up, and it was like, all right, is this the guy we're getting? But it was Seattle, where that was the time period when Seattle was legit allowing every single wide receiver to finish top 30 against them, like every single week for the first, I think it was the first 7 or 8 weeks of the season. That's the only thing. So I just wanted to say that game kind of propped up that section.
Sure. Yeah. But I think so. Again, like this is I'm more so on gut feel right now. Tags has apparently done way more research into this than I have. But with Michael Gallup, I just feel like this offense is going to be good enough to support these guys at least in the same range. Am I a little bit too low on CeeDee Lamb? Sure. But yet I also want to see what the heck they do with Dak Prescott. Is he going to come back? Is he going to even be ready for the start of the season, right? There's a lot of questions here. So I just think this is more so I'm projecting, or at least gut feeling, that there's going to be an even target distribution between CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and even Amari Cooper. So I think that's kind of where I'm coming in, rather than these guys being all the way elevated to, top 12 options and then Michael Gallup in the basement.
All right, let's move on to a favorite of the podcast in terms of how much we love his talent, and that's Jerry Jeudy. Tags, you are higher here. You've got him 35th. Yates, you have him 43rd. Tags, it seems aggressive to me for Jeudy. So go ahead, make your case.
It is a little aggressive. I'm not even going to lie about it. But this is more to do with the role that they had in the offense, where it's like they clearly wanted Jerry Jeudy to be the guy. They really do. Cortland Sutton coming back, is that going to crush some of the hopes and dreams for Jerry Jeudy? Probably. But at the same time, Tim Patrick was able to make it work. You know what I mean? Where Jerry Jeudy, they started out in the season, it was almost like this team didn't know how to utilize him. And it still seems like they don't know how to utilize him. And that's a Pat Shurmur thing. Because they put him in the slot. He was slot exclusive. Basically, he was running 90+% of his routes from the slot over the first 8 weeks of the year. And then all of a sudden, they put him on the perimeter and good things started to happen. And then they just stopped moving him back into the slot. They just kept him perimeter only rather than moving him around the formation and exercising mismatches. Drew Lock started to struggle. Drew Lock has struggled. This ranking, if Drew Lock were back as the quarterback, I would not have Jerry Jeudy 35.
That's really what I was going to, Tags, because it's really hard for me to see him getting to that point with Drew Lock as the quarterback.
If Drew Lock was back, I'd say I'd probably put Jeudy around wide receiver 42-ish point.
Okay.
But right now I'm building in that I do think that they move on from Drew Lock. This team is actually better than people realize. There's a whole lot of good pieces on this team. And once the defense is back healthy, they add a cornerback or two. This team can compete, but they need a quarterback. Is this a team that's going to pull it off to move up in the draft to get one of the quarterbacks? Are they going to try and pull off a trade for Deshaun Watson? We don't know. It stinks because I really did want to see Matthew Stafford go to Denver. It would have been fantastic. But at the same time, this is kind of like me moving him up a little bit because I'm expecting a difference, but I can't put him too high. To be fair, looking at it, I'm probably a little too high on him. Maybe 37, 38 should be where I have him, but either way, I'm not going to be incredibly low on Jerry Jeudy just because of last year.
Yeah, I'm on Yates. I mean, I have him 45th, so I'm even lower than Yates. But Yates, I mean, if there's anything you want to add, I assume that you are basically making this ranking assuming that Drew Lock is the quarterback, or does it not matter to you?
Right. That was kind of the conversation I was going to ask. Who's throwing the ball? Is it Drew Lock? Right. Then I'm not really interested. I do think that
Justin Fields, maybe.
I do think that they're a player that they are, players in the quarterback market. We saw them be involved in the conversation for Matthew Stafford. Sure. So I think that they absolutely could be in the, the conversation to move up and get a quarterback in the draft, or be a player for, a Jameis Winston in free agency, whatever. And that would drastically change how I view Jerry Jeudy. But as of right now, with Drew Lock as a quarterback under contract for next year, I'm keeping Jerry Jeudy outside my top 40.
Yep. No, that's where I am as well. But I agree with you. If it is somebody other than Drew Lock, somebody better than Drew Lock, which, admittedly for fantasy purposes, it's not all that high a bar, then I would probably move Jerry Jeudy up. But for now, I'm not all that optimistic as to what we'll see from him in 2021. Odell Beckham Jr. I'm always the low guy on Odell Beckham Jr. Guys, if you're listening to this, if you listen to this in the preseason, that's just how it's going to be so long as he's with Cleveland. I probably am. I'm not crazy lower than you guys, but Tags, again, you are the high guy here versus Yates and versus me. Tags, you have him 16th. Yates, 22nd. I'm 23rd, so barely. But Tags, make your case for Odell.
I mean, I think we saw Baker grow a lot in 2020. And basically, people talk about, well, it's a coincidence that Odell Beckham goes out and Baker Mayfield's all of a sudden good. He's better without Odell Beckham. That's not true. That's not true at all. It's just more of like he was forcing the ball. Baker Mayfield was he got a new toy, and it's like he kept on trying to force the ball. And then there was a game where they played. Who was it against? It was against. I remember it was a primetime game that the Browns played, and Beckham had a big game, but it wasn't because he had a lot of targets. It was because Baker started like legit just scanning the field and not forcing the ball to Beckham. And we saw him do that as the year went on. Baker became the quarterback that they really wanted him to be, the quarterback that we kind of saw his rookie year, where his confidence started to come back. The offensive line started to block a little bit better. The run game was functioning. And it's like now when you get Odell Beckham back in this offense, it's going to be a different ball game. And I did lower expectations for Beckham. I'm not willing to say that he's like, oh, you draft him in the second or third round, he's going to be a steal. But by putting him as the wide receiver 16, I maybe even wide receiver 17, I think he belongs in that range basically. If you put him there, you can get him in the fourth round. So therefore you've probably got 2 running backs in your roster. You have another wide receiver, and you're getting Beckham as your wide receiver 2, a guy that presents that massive upside. Are we relying on it anymore? No, because this offense under Stefanski is not going to be an offense that's going to throw the ball. They don't even throw the ball 550 times. They want to run the ball, and rightfully so. However, it's a very concentrated effort where you saw when Beckham went down, Rashard Higgins was viable. Jarvis Landry was viable.
Right.
I mean, Donovan Peoples-Jones even had a couple games in there. So do you mean to tell me that Odell Beckham, a guy that was like legitimately changing the game of fantasy football for a few years, can't make an impact in this offense and be a wide receiver 2 in fantasy? I think that's crazy. I think that it gets to the point where it's like, okay, enough is enough. And I do understand the negative points to him. I understand people are going to say they're going to throw out his injuries. They're going to throw out his yearly finishes because of those injuries. They're going to throw out, how he was in 2019. In 2020, he was actually solid before going down with injury. He had a game or two that wasn't great, but he was solid. He was fine as a wide receiver too. And now it's like another year, another injury. And
for the most part, it was on the backs of that one giant game, right, against Dallas, where he had 5 catches for 81 yards and 2 touchdowns and 73 yards rushing and a touchdown. He was fine other than that. But you make a fair point, Tags, because I feel like when I was arguing against him in the preseason, which is terrifying, by the way, arguing against Odell Beckham Jr. is a terrifying proposition to do. But it was generally that he's basically seen a 25% target share and 10 targets a game his entire career. He's not going to see that with Cleveland. How is he going to do that? Well, and it sounds like now, Tags, again, the argument now is 16th, where I think I ranked him coming into the year, maybe 17th, which was fading him a bit as opposed to consensus. But really, Tags, what it sounds like is like you're not assuming that it's going to be sort of the old targets or the old target share necessarily for Beckham, or maybe the old target share, fine. But it's not going to be quite as many targets, but he doesn't need to have those targets in this offense to be able to have success. Again, as you mentioned, as the wide receiver 16, this isn't a wide receiver 1 that you're talking about. He doesn't need the crazy high volume necessarily to justify that result. That's basically where you're coming from.
I'm expecting like 7 targets a game. If I get 7-8 targets a game, I'm fine with Beckham as my wide receiver 2.
And he will get that. I mean, you look at, you had that first game where he had the 10 targets where they were just forcing him against Baltimore. But then, 6, 8, 9, then he had a 3 game, then he got injured and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're going with 7 targets, it's not a bad point. 16th isn't really bad. So Yates, I mean, I fade him generally. You have him 22nd. It's wide receiver 2 territory, obviously, so we're not crazy here, but make the case for having him a little lower then.
Yeah, it's offensive philosophy, like Tags mentioned, as far as the being committed to the running game. Yes, you did see Rashard Higgins and Donovan Peoples-Jones step up and be viable, but not all the way up as a wide receiver 2. And so with OBJ, as far as talent, still a top 10 talent at the wide receiver position, maybe even top 5. But yet, I just think with this offense, with the injury risk, we now have to officially start to bake that into his draft cost, right? Because that's something that we have to be worried about. As a low-end wide receiver 2, I'm fine with that. Anything more than that, starting to get a little concerned.
Yeah, oddly enough, Tags, even though I faded him, Tags has sort of made a good case for me. Like, I'm going to kind of revisit it. Again, we got a long way to go, of course. But for now, yeah, I mean, you make a decent point. All right, guys. That was 10. That was 10 players, so I think that's a good place to cut it. Let's talk very briefly just about the Super Bowl. What are we expecting? You can make your Super Bowl predictions. Tags, who's going to win the Super Bowl?
Man, I'm going to take the Chiefs, and people have asked me, they're like, oh, what are you betting on? I said, I'm not betting against Tom Brady. Right. Now, as our job, we have to pick, who do we pick to be the winner? And I'm going to say it's the Chiefs, and I will say that the final score is 31-30, the Chiefs. So I am taking I would say, the Bucks plus 3.5. If you get the 3.5, So I've seen lines from 3 and 3.5.
Yeah.
It seems like it's been stuck at 3 right now, but there was a time where you were able to get the Bucks plus 3.5. If you get the hook there, I guess I would take Tampa plus the 3.5 points because I do believe it's going to be a close game. But money line, it would be the Chiefs, and I would say the over. The over is probably what I'm most confident in because I don't think either of these teams are going to run the ball a whole lot, and it's just like you're going to see a slugfest between these two. So that's where it's like I'll take the over in this game. That's the one I feel pretty confident about.
Yeah, it's funny. The consensus over, I think now it might be at 56.5. It's bounced around a little bit like that. But the highest over-under ever was 57 for that Falcons-Patriots. So everybody's like, by the way, we're making this an aggressive line. And everybody sharps or, just squares. Everybody kind of views the over as probably the right side. Yates, remind me, did you have this matchup as your original prediction?
I did indeed.
Ugh. God, I hate it when Yates is right. Okay, so who did you originally predict the Chiefs then?
I
to
did.
win?
I'll stick with it. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Look, it's very hard. I can't see a scenario, guys, that unless Patrick Mahomes gets injured, that they don't win this game. Like, it's just...
You just jinxed
can't
it, by the way.
What'd you say?
You just jinxed it, by the way.
Yeah, well, if I have the power to influence the Super Bowl, then I should be a very rich man by basically being able to do that. But really, that's what it is the Bucks, I don't know about you guys, the Bucks haven't blown me away in these playoffs. I mean, Brady threw the 3 picks. He basically tried to get Green Bay back in that game necessarily. They haven't dominated. They let, Heineke throw all over them, and maybe they weren't prepared for that because they thought Smith. In, the first game, they, Drew Brees looked like, Will throwing the ball a little bit there in the playoffs. And then, against the Packers, you beat Aaron Rodgers, you beat the Packers, especially when your secondary is decimated. Okay, but they haven't blown me away. And again, seeing what the Chiefs did to the Bills, which I was shocked. The Chiefs haven't covered a spread for the whole second half of the season, and then to dominate the Bills was a little crazy. So I am expecting the Chiefs, but... All right, that's going to do it for today. Again,
I didn't give my score. I didn't give my score. I'll do 30-27.
Okay, so you're also going with the over. I will give my score on the Super Bowl live stream that you can go to at youtube.com/bettingpros. Again, 4:30 to 5:30 Eastern on Super Bowl Sunday. We are going to be giving away an awesome helmet, a mystery box from Pristine Auction. You don't want to miss it. Don't forget to enter our J.K. Dobbins jersey giveaway. Review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, or go to fantasypros.com/contest to submit a screenshot of that review. We will be back next week breaking down, I'm sure, the Super Bowl and talking about more differences in rankings early on. I will talk to you then.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.